However you are and whenever you are, welcome back, good souls, to this planet called Earth as we slide and slip through the universe at cosmic speeds that you cannot feel unless you can feel it in your soul. And as usual, we will traverse this cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. As you can see with me, here is Thom Reed. I'll bring Thom on in just a moment, and we will be discussing, well, probably one of the biggest UFO events in history, and finally, it's getting its day. It's getting its day, and it's getting the coverage. Many more people know about the Berkshire UFO event of September 1969, Labor Day, and that was because the Unsolved Mystery series on Netflix did a fairly good job of covering the story, and Thom will respond to that in just a moment. And then in the second half an hour tonight, we have Race Hobbs from KGRA Radio, and we'll be discussing the changes and the unsettling events associated with MUFON. I'm sure many of you have heard about this already. There's a lot going on in the news right now as far as ufology goes. And then, of course, for the second hour, our featured guests, Lori Gum and Shane McClellan from the Q Files podcast. To get just paranormally weird, we will cover it all: cryptids, ghosts, ufology. So that should be a really fun conversation with Shane and Lori. And welcome to the Saturday night time slot. So yeah, if you've been hanging with Paranormal Now over the past, I guess, almost 4 years now, we have a good track record of hopping around, changing platforms and changing time slots. So hopefully we will settle here Saturday nights, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for a good run. So thank you for sticking with us, and thank you for joining us tonight if this is your first time listening or watching Paranormal Now. If you are listening on KGRA Radio or on the podcast later, you can check out all of the KGRA radio shows on kgrradio.com. And those of us who are now streaming video as well for the live shows, just go to KGR Radio on YouTube and on Facebook, and you can find all of those past shows. And the cool thing is, as we go throughout the night, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, I can see your comments, or at least when I'm paying attention. So if you have a question for our guests, just lay it out there. I'll highlight your comment, and we'll try to get it on. I think one of the biggest ufological news drops we've had since 2017 of December. Again, the New York Times has released this article, and I'll just read a little bit for those who who are not privy, and it's been out a couple of days. So here we go. No longer in the shadows, Pentagon's UFO unit will make some findings public. For over a decade, the program, now tucked inside the Office of Naval Intelligence, has discussed mysterious events in classified briefings. Despite Pentagon statements that it disbanded a once covert program to investigate unidentified flying objects, the effort remains underway, renamed and tucked inside the Office of Naval Intelligence, where officials continue to study. Continue is the key word here. Continue to study mystifying encounters between military pilots and unidentified aerial vehicles. Pentagon officials will not discuss the program, which is not classified but deals with classified matters. Yet, it appeared last month in a Senate committee report outlining spending on the nation's intelligence agencies for the coming year. The report said the program, the UAP Task Force, was to standardize collection and reporting on sightings of explained aerial phenomena. So not ATIP. This is UAP Task Force, another task force. So what this means is that not only has the Navy changed its story, yes, they're covering this, no, they're not covering this, yes, they're unidentified, no, they're not identified, but that they've been studying this for years. And I think those of us in this field, we kind of knew that closing the Project Blue Book door wasn't the end all be all. But man, since that first drop in 2017, revealing the ATIP program, and now this to boot, Eric Davis, who worked on one of these programs, he said He also gave classified briefings on retrievals of unexplained objects. Retrievals of unexplained objects to staff members of the Senate Armed Services Committee on October 21, 2019, to staff members of the Senate Intelligence Committee 2 days later. So this, like, if you don't consider this disclosure, then this is probably the closest to soft disclosure that we have had. The recognition, the being allowed, in a sense, to discuss this in the public sphere is extraordinarily impressive. That the New York Times has continued to follow and investigate on this story. And I think 100% it's a generational thing. I think that the Congress people that we have now come just from a different breed, a different generation. Our military personnel have a different mindset and a different approach towards all these odd subjects, but UFOs in particular. And I think that they're not afraid. And I think that they're pushing against these special access programs that have been so black budget secreted for decades. And they want to find out what the heck is going on, because once you accept that a multitude of Navy pilots are seeing craft that are completely unexplained, then from a national defense standpoint, you have to do something. It's your absolute duty. So these are really, really exciting times. Hopefully Race Hobbs and I will talk about this in just a little bit as well. But as a friendly reminder, please call in the second hour to our Paranormal Radio app hotline. That's 855-472-5483. That's 85-KGRA live. Stand by. We will pull you on. We'll give you the cue, and then you can ask our guests in the second hour your questions. And now I have the honor of once again bringing on Thom Reed. Thom, it's absolutely a pleasure to this time see you again.
Yeah. Likewise, it's been a while.
Yeah. How are you doing, brother?
And thanks, Bill, for also hooking us up. This has been a crazy year, has it not? I mean, just in general, it's been a mix of so many different dynamic come together, from the Elon Musk to our unsolved mysteries to all the little things that we're dealing with today. Anyway, I've got 20 minutes here to kind of wrap up or talk to you about what's new or what happened with everything.
Yeah, one thing we want to know about is the the new UFO Monument Park. So things are going well in its direction, correct?
Yeah, we're getting one of the benches back. So I think we have there's a couple of things that caused that to happen. Of course, Nadine, who was in the select board members, she lost her reelection, and the new guy Bob, who took her place, has been much more accommodating. And I think that the Unsolved Mystery Show also has the town talking. And I think that there's I think they're starting to realize that this could be a good thing for the town as well. And so it's baby steps. We're getting the bench back, and that should be back in about a week or so. And of course, there was a lot of people that got involved in that show. Some that were cut out of the show, but a lot of the locals were in it. They were able to be heard without having to concern themselves with any, repercussions, if you will.
Or the giggle factor.
Yeah, I mean, it's all. Everything seems to. It could not have come out at a better time, right?
Seriously.
Our show I was working with Cindy, our segment producer, since 2015. Mm-hmm. So what she said, Thom, who do you think would be willing to go on camera? And I kind of sent her to the Historical Society because they're the ones that inducted it. So I thought that they might show, more of the documents, which I have here for your viewers. So I think originally they were going to focus more on my brother and I, and Matthew just didn't want to do it. He's like, so my mother was like, I'll step in, and I've never gone on camera before. She's 80 years old. We almost lost her about 2 years ago. And I thought, or she thought maybe, first of all, she grew up watching Unsolved Mysteries. So she thought this is going to be a good show, right? So I don't mind doing it. So they actually accommodated her, and we filmed in Atlanta. We only live a couple hours outside Atlanta. So
just to make clear for anybody who just came in late, we're talking about the 1969 September UFO incident that Thom Reed and his family were firsthand experiencers of.
Yeah, it was actually our diner that back up to my mother. So my mother actually I drove her to Atlanta. She filmed in Atlanta. I went, of course, to Sheffield. And with that, we filmed at Galata's gas station, which was right next to our diner.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, WSBS was right there. And there were a lot of locals who thought, you know what, I don't mind talking out. So anytime somebody said, hey, Thom, I wouldn't mind speaking to somebody, I kind of passed their email on to Unsolved, and they would decide whether or not they thought that person would really have anything to add. So as far as the show goes, I think the show, I like the way it focused on what took place on that particular day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we were under the impression that a lot of the documents would be shown. And I think when it came out, a lot of us were like, what happened? We're waiting for those documents. But to understanding their direction on this, they want to focus on the flight path. And I think if you watch that, you can see where it came from Pittsfield, through Lenox, Stockbridge, through Great Barrington, and made its way to Sheffield.
Sure.
And so they were able to work with the Pittsfield Library, and then work with Jan Green, who saw it in the Stockbridge area, and then WSBS, and follow that path. And that's really what they wanted to focus on. But for your viewers who don't know, there were an awful lot of documents that we received from the government. Governor Charles D. Baker, the Historical Society. And this is one of the envelopes that came to me. It's also sealed by a judge. This is one of the letters that came from the Historical Society. And I post a lot of these, but these are actually the originals. And, obviously I just can't carry these around with me, but this is the one from the governor's office that mimics the sign in the park. And this is, again, the second letter we got from the Historical Society. So we've gotten multiple letters, and by the way, this is WSBS's letter, which hangs in the Roswell Museum. That's a copy of that. And this is the second letter from the governor's office.
So for the listeners, these are very official looking letters.
Yeah. So to kind of just give an idea to everybody, a short snapshot of how this happened. Our diner was the hub for the conversation. And anybody who knows Great Barrington knows that there used to be a horse track there. So our diner was like one of the rare eateries outside the Great Barrington horse track. Okay. And so it wasn't far over the line of Albany, New York, and Hartford. And those people who wanted to bet on the horses came to that. Rather than Saratoga, that was the biggest track. And so our diner got a mix of people. And a lot of the kids would eat at our diner, and we'd all walk to school together because it was basically across the street from elementary school. Mm-hmm. And it was those kids who rode those little banana seat bikes and listened to our jukebox and had shakes in our diner that are in their 40s and 50s and 60s now. And so it was them who remembered this. And so when we were approached by the Historical Society and said, look, we'd like to do something with this, would you take a polygraph test? Would you, be willing to meet with our board and that kind of thing? Of course, I said, absolutely, I will. And so many other people at the time were writing letters and giving statements, and some of those were judges, some of those were historians and bankers. Mm-hmm. And so they thought, well, how can we really make this something for the community? Because they're not coming to Great Barrington or the Historical Society to look at the latest musket ball, right? So they, what can we do? This happened, there's no question it happened. And so they voted or looked at our diner and said, well, did that diner alter the natural progression of the community, just like Billy the Kid altered the railroad? So did your family's diner alter the natural progression of the community? And if so, then the event as a whole was historically significant and true. And that's really how it got inducted. And so a lot of the shows have focused on our family and my brother and I, but this was a very big sighting. A lot of people saw this, and I've always said this was a bigger sighting than most people recognized, or it got a lot of mainstream press, but it didn't get a lot of press within the UFO community because back in the day, there wasn't papers, there weren't articles. It wasn't in Project Blue Book. It was recorded, given a classification in September, but it never made Project Blue Book.
Right.
And so it's kind of sat in the background a little bit. But
that's a good point too to make, Thom, that Project Blue Book isn't the be all end all. Who knows how many other events and cases that just never made it on the radar. Yeah.
Right.
And so I really enjoyed the episode. I think I have to tell you what I think I messaged you this, but I had concerns when I heard they're bringing Unsolved Mysteries back because I loved that show as a kid, and it was cool because you kind of felt like you were participating in real time and actually making a difference because people did call in and they got leads on reports.
Yeah.
And then they tried to reboot it. I think it was 2008 to 2010 and it was So I was really concerned about this. And I have to say that the producers who also produced Stranger Things on Netflix did an excellent job. But there were parts of this case that were omitted. And there are a few issues with that. And could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, the documents, I think
that's a big point. Sure. Mm-hmm.
And, there were a couple other people I thought should have been in it. Certainly Kevin Titus, Kevin, Judge Kevin Titus from Canaan, Connecticut now. And, he was a witness. He saw the cattle mutilation. He was part of that. And again, he knew my father when he knew my father right after he got out of office. My father was a select board member as well and a lawyer, and he knew kind of Kevin afterwards. And so again, this is a very small community, so a lot of people knew each other, back as kids and haven't seen each other in a very long time, and now they're kind of getting back together. There were three other family next to us had three children, the heirs, and they were witnesses to it as well. And so again, there were a lot of people that I think could have added something to the show, but they streamlined it and they chose their particular, key figures that they wanted in it. And of course, we had no say in how it got edited.
Right, but your story, there's so much more to it.
Oh yeah, there's so much more. My father had this taken to the United Nations. I shouldn't say my father had it taken. Bletchman, who was an attorney along with my father, they were both Democrats at the time, and No Kid Left Behind, and they kind of ran in the same circles. Mm-hmm. And during the it was kind of a wave, the Hudson River Valley sightings. You're very well aware of that, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so my father was approached by Bletchman, and oddly enough, my condo was not far from Bletchman's law firm in Manchester, Connecticut. And so I'd meet him after work and discuss this symposium that was coming up in October in 1992 at the United Nations with the president of the Parapsychology Society, Mohammed Ramadan. And with that, he had approached my father to see if he would mind mentioning our family's incident because it was over water. The Hudson River Valley, was over water. Our case was over the Housatonic River. So there was a connection with water. It wasn't far away. My father was in office. He was an attorney. So they thought it might add some credibility to the angle that he was looking to pitch at the United Nations, which was 10 days before that. I guess it was SETI was launching their new microwavable technology, their satellites. And so this was a good time again to bring up the Hudson River Valley sightings along with the Great Barrington or the Berkshire's UFO case at the same time. And that was on October 2nd, 1992. And as a lot of people know, my father lost his life on October 2nd as well. And so that was something else that kind of fueled some of the historians and those people in the area to look at our case a little more seriously because my father was advocating what took place in the community. And so being that he was also an historian, a lot of the historians thought, well, maybe we could do something in return and pay that forward to your father. And that was kind of how the whole monument thing came to be, which, of course, I don't know how I got blamed for installing a 5,000-pound monument when I live 1,000 miles away, but that has been something that's been circulating. Nothing could be further from the truth. The town of Sheffield installed that, and all that's on my website. But I think that's coming back too. The bench is coming back. That was removed. Yeah. A lot of good came from this. Sure, the documents could have been mentioned, and some other people could have gotten in the show. But at the end of the day, this couldn't have aired at a better time. It was a credible program. And they showed the flight pattern, and they got a lot of other people in the show that normally would never have had a voice. And so for that, I'm grateful. And I think it was very successful. And I'm not complaining at all. I'm showing my documents on your show anyway. So.
But it's okay. It's totally okay to critique and still be happy with something, all the positives have come out of it. In fact, we were just talking about this, and I watched this video as well. The behavioral panel
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We can talk about that too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You saw the Jan Green one.
Exactly. I'm going to post the link in the comment sections here.
Okay. So you want to talk about that for a second?
No. So go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So for those who aren't aware of the behavior panel, they're made up of 4 or 5 professional body and language analysts. And they've already analyzed Jan Green. And Jan Green, we used to know as a child. She had the pharmacy in town, but she also had a restaurant in her pharmacy. Believe it or not, she actually you could get coffee in her pharmacy back in the day. So we knew her back in the early 70s. In Great Barrington, we had the spot in Sheffield. And so anyway, she's a fantastic person. You know, she was one of the first callers. She was the one who actually drove down to WSBS and knocked on the door and said, hey, listen, if you got, the UFOs right over that way. And so she played an important part because she didn't just make a phone call. She drove all the way to the radio station because Tom J was back on the air, and she drove over there to say, hey, there it is. And so for that, she's 100% accurate in her delivery, her recall. She's, the 5 analysts looked at her body language, looked at how everything from the way she squints to her eyes to everything, and agreed that she was 100%, honest in her retelling of what happened. And so I'm being done on Tuesday. I'm going to be going on a show much like this where I'm going to Skype in. They're going to ask me questions, look at my response and critique, and they're going to do Melanie's agreed, and pretty much everybody's agreed, and pretty much everybody. And so we'll see what happens or what they have to say about that. But they're good at what they do, and again I'm glad they're doing it. I want them to do the body language. I support that. I want them to look at us and say, okay, these guys are telling the truth. I mean, that's a polygraph already, but this would be interesting too. It's kind of like, I want this. I encourage it. You know what I mean?
The similarity between the Travis Walton case and this case is that you have these multiple witnesses that you can take lie detector tests. You can, analyze their behaviors to see if they're lying. And I think that's fantastic that you are, there are enough of you that are open to do that.
Yeah. And why wouldn't we? I mean, I can only go in our favor when if
you're telling the truth.
Right. Yeah. And I think, as you look at these individuals in the program and I'll tell you one more thing. Okay. So the officer in the show in Great Barrington opens up his binder from 1969 and says, oh, we've only got 2 incidents in here, right? Now, this was a holiday. This was a Labor Day holiday. You mean to tell me there were only two incidents in the Great Barrington, in the police department only had 2 incidents that day? That's impossible. I mean, you've got thousands and thousands of people, horse shows, kids, rides. Obviously, there was a page missing or something out of that book. And then they focused on Galata too, and his father was the chief of police who used to eat at our diner to keep the tension down a little bit. And he was talking about, now you're talking about Sheffield with only 3,000 people back in the day. They were swamped with calls. You saw the show, right? They were swamped with calls in Sheffield. That's a town with 3,000 people. And you're looking at Great Barrington, and they're saying there were only 2 calls, and one of them was some guy's garbage got knocked over or something. Right. This was a ringed binder. Why didn't they say, hey, wait a minute, couldn't a page or 2 have gotten ripped out of that binder? Because that's like makes no sense. And they never followed up with a question going, this is Labor Day holiday. People are drinking. People are hanging out. That's why there were so many witnesses, because it was Labor Day. And people were outside having barbecues. 2 incidences in the book? Come on. The WSBS was burning up with phone calls. So there were some things I was like, come on, Now,
do you think that they're... Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Then there was a report that just came out. I guess some paper said that they thought the FBI was trying to squash this. Did you see that article? No? Okay, that's floating around too. Yeah. The theories, the unsolved mysteries theories that come out, and they say, what do you think happened? Or what, people send in and they say, let us know, give us a heads up on something.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Well, apparently a lot of people are feeling that the FBI tried to squash it back in the day. And that's out there. Yeah. So if you Google Berkshire's UFO, FBI, FBI, whatever, tries to block case or, yeah.
Are they presenting actual evidence, or is it just a conspiracy theory?
I think it's, I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory. I think it's just that because there were so many reports and nothing in the binder for the police department, which is odd. Obviously, it looks like someone's been trying to keep it quiet. And if you look at the attitude of the community, even 50 years later, they were still trying to squash it, right? I mean, what's been going on. Mm-hmm. Why would you want to squash that? And I think one of the reasons is it did go to the United Nations. There's a huge political thread in our case, not only because of my father being my grandmother was the governess for Franklin Delano Roosevelt's grandchildren. Did you know that?
No, that part I did not know.
Until I was 3 years old.
Your history just keeps expanding, Thom.
Well, this is my mother, and my grandmother was the governess for Franklin Delano Roosevelt's grandchildren in Cherry Hills, Colorado, back in from 1958 to 1963. Okay, and when my mother split up with my birth father, my grandmother invited us out to Colorado to live at the Roosevelts, and so my mother, for those 3 years, really got into politics. And so when my father, her second marriage, my stepfather, graduated law school, she pushed him into politics. And that's how we got into office. And then, of course, that helped get attention to the Great Barrington or Berkshire's UFO case, which is our family's case. And, of course, then knowing people and historians and judges and other lawyers, it got mentioned at the UN. And so it has this political thread through it. But it's a political thread that I think most people at the time involved in this topic would have rather had squashed, right? Because if I was to, back in the day, if I were to say, I'd like to talk about this UFO in Great Barrington. Well, who was I? I was a small business owner, right? Mm-hmm. But my father could pick up the phone as a lawyer and a politician and get right through to the Hartford Courant, get right through to New York Times. So my father had a voice. And that helped in some respects, but I think it also, cut his life short.
We'd also, during these events, especially when they're on holidays and people are drinking, that's a debunker go-to. And in this case, you all were teenagers, 10, 12, 13, I mean, you weren't all, drunk and stoned out of your mind that night.
No, it's too early in the day. No.
All right. Well.
And that's the other thing too, if you look at some of the posts, they were on acid. I'm thinking, my mom was feeding your children acid, right?
God. Yeah.
I'm grateful and that we're getting our due, like you said earlier. I think you dealt with that, and it's true. I think that, when you talk about a case that involves yourself, it's almost like you're self-promoting for years. You're like, this happened. I want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. But I've never said that. I didn't build a UFO park with sponsors in Sheffield for myself. That's 1,000 miles away from where I live. I did it for them, and I want the locals to get more involved. I want them to speak out. Mm-hmm. This is about me. I'm successful. I do okay. I'm not doing this for attention, but anybody can have a career, right? Anybody can. My mother was a radio personality for WKZE radio in Sharon, Connecticut. I don't know if you knew that either. She was at our FM station, and she mentioned it a couple times on the air, but left it alone. But I guess what I'm saying is that anybody can have a job or a career, but not everybody can make history, right? And this community. Right now, if they could stop the feuding and just get on the same page, and I think they're starting to do that, that community as a whole could make history together. Those kids never wavered. They stuck to their guns. And there's a few of us that have gone the extra mile to say, look, you can't jump into this topic with 1 foot. So we were the first ones to take that leap, right?
Right. You
so
definitely
once we had taken that leap, there was no getting out of the pool at that point. And so now other people are following suit. Now it's like the first person that gets up and dance, right? Once that first couple get up and dance, it's okay for everybody else. So we were the first ones to get up and dance. And now it's time for other people to take the reins.
And the music is playing, Thom. I mean, the timing, like you said, is brilliant. It's a great time for the study of ufology.
Sure.
So thank you so much for all of your efforts and creating more awareness of it. And so for everybody listening and watching, you've been hanging out with Living History tonight with Thom Reed. Thom, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate it, and have a good night.
Thank you for having me on, buddy.
All right. Take care, my friend.
All right, bye-bye.
All right. So next, who else better to talk about ufology and the MUFON happenings than the one and only Race Hobbs from KGRA Radio. Race, my brother, how are you?
I'm good, Alan. It's good to have you back.
And it's good to see you in your new funky your studio.
Yeah, it's nice to have the digs back here in Arkansas. Yeah.
I love it, man. All right. So hey, I mean, this is some heavy business that went down, and there's a lot in ufology we could talk about right now, but I don't want to let this get overshadowed by the other news, and that is Jan Harzan, the former executive director of MUFON, was removed from office because he was arrested for soliciting a 13-year-old for sex. So I know there's a mixed bag of opinions on the history of MUFON. So I'd just like to get your take on what this means. Was this something that was coming?
No. Jan Harzan had a long corporate career, and he was very smooth around the edges. Mm-hmm. And he was very smart. What I thought he was very smart. Obviously, if he's guilty of what he did, he's an idiot. He's stupid, more stupid than I thought. Mm-hmm. But again, he was probably in the driver's seat for as long as he wanted to do it. I mean, they have terms, and the board votes on, new executive directors. I don't think it's every 4 years or I don't know, something. Mm-hmm. And he probably could have been there as long as he wanted because he was very good at fundraising and running the business and being out in front of the business. And, he was very well spoken and very well presented. So I think Jan was going to be around for a long time to come, but mm-hmm. I never saw it coming. Well, and I don't think anyone else did either.
No one did. In fact, I had mentioned to you that I called Kathleen Martin, and she doesn't even feel comfortable talking about it. Especially right now and maybe in time, but I think for a lot of people that thought of him as just a good dude, and he ran what some would say is a good ship. But there are
Kathleen Martin is a class act.
She absolutely is.
She is a very classy person, very professional person. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that you wouldn't hear her make any comments one way or the other right now. That's just that's how I should be. But I'm not. I'm not.
It's painful because when you're when you work that closely with somebody or someone for that long, and there are those who say that this didn't happen, that this is all a farce and a staged to look like he did something that he did not do, and it was a setup. I mean, I
feel sorry for those people.
Yeah,
because they're probably going to get taken one way or another in life by, some crooked telemarketer or, getting their oil changed or whatever, because, these people think that the police are the enemy today. And I'm one of the ones who still have all the faith in the world in our law enforcement agencies, our sheriffs, our municipal police, and, and our state police, and even the FBI after Comey and McCabe and all that stuff up, that we've learned about them. I still believe in the FBI, Flight 800. I still believe in the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, the military. I still have faith in it. But, you know, even now under the microscope that law enforcement is under, does it make sense for a local law enforcement agency in Huntington Beach to entrap a guy that has absolutely no value to set up? I mean, somebody has to have some kind of a value, some sort of a value that rates them to be set up. You know, this guy has some sort of a, you know, like let's just say an Epstein. There has to be a value as to why someone would want to kill him versus him kill himself. And
he certainly had value.
That's correct.
Well, the only thing I could imagine that people are thinking is that it's meant to tarnish MUFON, but that's a silly way to tarnish MUFON, because you just remove one person and you swap them out with somebody else.
Yeah, it's totally it's not if tarnishing MUFON. That's one I just heard. That's the first I've ever heard that one. But I mean, people are saying that, oh, well, so-and-so told Jan Harzan, you know, 2 days before he got set up that there were going to be releasing some cases that the military gave MUFON to investigate, and that the findings were over the top and this thing. Let me tell you something. If Jan Harzan, being as smart as Jan Harzan was, he would have redundancies in place. He's not new to the UFO game. He's not new to secrecy or compartmentalization. He's not new to people being run over or you know, killed in car wrecks mysteriously or suicides mysteriously. He would have redundancies in place where if this was really meant to come out, it would come out. There's no, and most importantly, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, and I said this on Jimmy Church, I think that Jan Harzan was running MUFON as like just an addition to his financial addition to his pension, his IBM pension, because he charged MUFON a fee to be executive director every month. And he charged them money to store files, paper files in his garage. You know, I mean, he was making money off of MUFON. And the guy who took it over, Dave MacDonald, the man who took it over, he never did. When he was international director after the Bigelow fallout, Clifford Clift came and stepped in when Jan Harzan was supposed to be taking it over, but Jan Harzan didn't want to take it over then.
Well, MUFON
because of the Bigelow fallout. He didn't want to be the guy that had to answer all the questions and deal with all the fallout and the flack. So they put this, this patsy in there. He lasts 2 years before MUFON went broke. And then Dave MacDonald came in and took them from, I think they were like 3 weeks from insolvency, I was told. And he brought them back to a, over $40,000 surplus, cash surplus. And, in just a little over a year or something. And then Jan Harzan came and took it over. But during the John Ventry thing, you and I have talked about this, I think, before. When he didn't remove John Ventry right away after what John Ventry did, I knew, because John Ventry was a benefactor. He pays thousands of dollars every month, every year to MUFON. And Jan Harzan didn't want to lose that benefactor. And he played that sympathy card about, we should be more interested, Alan, in why the man said what he said. We should be more interested in why he even said it or thought it in his mind. We shouldn't be worried about him saying something on his Facebook page, and that's when I accepted the fact that, and it was Kathleen Marden and Stanton Friedman threatening to leave MUFON over it. Because Kathleen Marden, you and I both know, you're good friends with her as well. She marched in the civil rights movement with Betty and Barney Hill. Her family was directly involved in the civil rights movement. So, that kind of subject about, calling out an entire race as subhuman and that it was scientifically proven to be true is just, to me, that's why I quit MUFON. That's why I quit hosting their radio show. That's why I removed them from the KGRA roster and I resigned at 9:00 that morning. And at 5:30 that evening, Jan Harzan removed John Ventry from the state director position, but still allowed him to stay an active volunteer in MUFON.
Right. I mean, many people have quit over the years for similar reasons. I know Chase Kloetsky, your friend, has had, umbrage with MUFON. My friend Ken Cherry, had bad experience as a state director as well. But David MacDonald, right? So generally people respect him. Correct?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So
in the organization. Yeah.
In the organization, but I see a lot of attacks on him online. And so for anyone listening, I think it's called Flamingo. Is it Flamingo Airs? Flamingo Airline?
That's correct. It's airline. Yeah.
So apparently, I guess this is true. I found one article from years ago on it. He takes people up for rides in the airplane, and they have a fetish. They just want to go up, have sex together in a plane up in the air, and then they come back down. So as far as I'm concerned, he's just providing a service. As long as it's clean, as long as it's respectable, like there's nothing unethical or amoral about what he's doing. Now I understand the optics, right? Like, is he the best choice considering literally what we just heard?
Yeah.
But pedophilia and this, two separate worlds, not the same, not related. But you just hear sex, and it obfuscates the message of MUFON changing, right? But if he sticks to his guns, do you think he'll pull through? Yeah.
Dave MacDonald, I agree with what you said 100%. Essentially, it is just a hotel room in the air, by two consenting adults, and everything is above board and legal. Mm-hmm. It's something that it's not even in the same ballpark as what Jan Harzan tried to do. Right. Jan Harzan thought he was going to meet a 13-year-old girl, some man's daughter, some boy's sister, a juvenile that it is just among some of the most heinous crimes in the United States. And so it's not even the same thing, but I will say that I know Dave MacDonald to be a very professional man. He's a very thick-skinned man, and he has a strong back. He's very positive and very motivated fella. And, the attacks really won't do much with him. I mean, it'll just come right off of him like water off a duck's back.
Why do you think so many people want MUFON to fail?
I think that this is a very small community, and a lot of people went into MUFON thinking a myriad of different things. A lot of them had visions of things going one way and they went another. A lot of them had thoughts of thinking that things were this way and they turned out to be that way. A lot of people were jealous of the people that were in place, and they thought they could do a better job than them, and they couldn't get their job. And there's just a lot of disgruntled people that exist in a very small village. The public UFO community is very, very small. Even when we bring in everybody from Australia and from Europe, sure. We're still a very small community, and there's just a few people really that are out in the middle of all of it at all times, in the public. And so I think that the whole MUFON needs to be reformed, and MUFON needs to fail, and we need something else. Doesn't really hold much water, because MUFON, to get where MUFON is, it would take a long time to get back to where MUFON is.
Should they look at the bones though, up and down, inside and out, and just?
I think the tea leaves need to be read. I think that when it comes to Dave MacDonald and this whole issue, let me go back.
Sure.
Yeah, it would be nice to have someone that didn't have that, in their portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
You would think that MUFON would be very super careful about who they, and I think they were super careful in everything. I think Dave MacDonald, based on what they had to choose from, is an extremely well thought out choice, well intentioned and well mannered choice as well. But, for this in the surface and the picture of it, we would want someone perfectly squeaky clean and very professional, CEO, retired, something or other, NASA, something. Mm-hmm. And it would have been, that would have been good. But I guarantee you people would have still found something to raise hell about. It's just the part of the game. And that's why I think that Dave MacDonald will do so well, because he is so thick skinned. But when it comes to MUFON failing, Alan, there's just a lot of disgruntled people there. I'm personally privy to a lot of that. See, you brought up Chase Kletsky, mm-hmm. and the thing about Chase and I was we were in MUFON. We had pretty prominent positions, and we're on the move and on the way up and doing good works. And, both of us with different stories, but the same kind of an issue with those up above us caused us to no longer be affiliated with MUFON, only to be brought back later, apologized to, recognize that it was their mistake and that they wanted to make it right. Mm-hmm. And they brought us back, and then we came back, and then we left again, because ultimately, well, for her and for me, was both Jan Harzan.
Was that something personal, or is it something that you can share that they did?
Well, for me, I felt like Jan Harzan had no backbone. He was not the kind of leader that I felt I could follow any longer. When John Ventry called out the African American race the way he did, yeah, and Jan Harzan did nothing for all that time, and I was right there communicating with him and with mm-hmm. the director of communications and the DOI, and I'm like, this is going to be bad. Well, I hadn't even got any emails about it. Well, you know what? You're gonna. Yeah. Give it a little bit of time, because I'm telling you right now, the brush fire.
Right. Be proactive about it.
Right. I mean, there's mm-hmm. no question, bro. There's no question. People, CEOs get accused of sexual harassment from 25 years ago, and they lose their job today. Yeah. We're talking about a guy that did this on social media. It was screen captured and caught, mm-hmm. 18 hours ago. The sun hadn't even gone down on the story when he was just ready to sweep it under the rug. And I was there when the whole thing, how it all went down. There were things that happened that I lost complete respect for him. He tried to get the director of communications to write a statement,
right. Even if you get David MacDonald, doing a great job, right, as far as logistics and organizing and just keeping things running along, is it really running along smoothly because you have so many gripes, or a lot of those gripes sort of just unjustified? I think that most people who volunteer for MUFON, they sincerely just want to know about this mystery. They're curious. They want to do their little part in the greater investigation. So I don't know if any of these people have ulterior motives, and they're seeking fame or attention and they're not getting it. I don't know if that could be a reason to hold.
Some of these people just have no character. They have no moral. Their moral compass is.
How do you vet that?
Well, it comes out after time. I don't want to name a name, but there was a lady that came to work here at KGRA, and she was in MUFON, and she took on several jobs in the organization and never completed any of them. She got several people removed from their positions, only to say that I could do it better, and didn't. She worked here at KGRA. We developed a show for her, and from the name on down, and she was willing to, by hook or by crook, no matter who she had to lie to or manipulate or misdirect or embellish. No, it didn't matter. She was going to do whatever it took to get her way the way she wanted it. And she got let go from here for dishonest and unethical behavior, gone on radio shows all over internet radio and on coast to coast, and made up lies, absolute lies to cover for lies. Yeah. And I know it. I know her and I know it. And she's one of the biggest MUFON haters on the planet. And she was she was all over Jan Harzan. When she couldn't get her way with him, she developed a passion to hate that man. And, all over her little radio show, and everybody else that was disgruntled in MUFON, she put on her little radio show. And that fosters a little club that fosters the negativity, and that little club kind of forms, Alan. And once it does, it's just something that's there. It comes and it goes. And I think MUFON has weathered the storm decade after decade after decade, 51 years. And I think in the internet age, bro, we're dealing with a lot of learning, a big learning curve, and they're growing in ways that they never have before. And I think there's a lot of growing pains involved with that. I mean, when it all comes down to it, we're chasing lights in the sky right out, right out front of everybody.
And doesn't that mean, though, that we need to make an extra effort toward integrity?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And Dave MacDonald, Dave MacDonald did the best he could back then. What happened with me leaving back then was under his watch, and it was wrong. I mean, I literally had a lawsuit sitting in my lap waiting against a nonprofit organization. And I didn't do anything with it because it came down the pike. Race, give it 6 months, we'll get you back in. And they wound up doing that, but it was not 6 months. It was over a year later, maybe 2 years. I can't even remember how long it was now, but I think MUFON, well, I can tell you this, and this to be true. Everybody that's in MUFON are volunteers, and a lot of those volunteers are salt of the earth folks that just want to find answers to this mystery. They want to learn and grow their investigation skills and portfolio. And they want to learn everything MUFON is willing to teach them, to add to what they've already learned in a lot of cases, to make them better. And I think there are a lot of ways that MUFON is able to help people, with things like that and other things. And so a lot of people are tremendously fulfilled from their experience with MUFON. They never had any dark days with MUFON and never got involved in the politics. And
well, as you were saying earlier, it's just like the way people approach the police issue, right? Or the FBI. Like, I think no matter where you are in the political spectrum, that any organization is susceptible to getting the wrong people in leadership roles, the bad apples. And I think that we should give MUFON a fair shake to turn this ship around and, and do better for itself. But it is difficult to navigate social media. And like you said, like the kind of the cliquey clubs that occur. I've always had like a weird relationship with Twitter. Shane McKellen, who's coming up in the next hour to join us, is one of the very few people I interact with on Twitter because I just like people get so mean, and I just don't like it out there, man. Like I have my opinions and I try to stay fairly neutral, but it's not a world that I am totally comfortable with. I can tell you that.
And it gets tough. I mean, I have walked away. I've walked away from Facebook a couple of times. Me too. Yeah. The KGRA Facebook page happens to be ran through mine because I was the one that, so I can't get rid of my Facebook page. We'll lose KGRA's Facebook page. So I'm kind of stuck, like I can't when I need to post things on there and all. I have to go back on, but I still do stuff on mine too, man. But it gets tough.
It does. All right. Well, want to leave us with any last thoughts? 30 seconds about this New York Times article that just came out.
Oh my God, I was let down a little bit.
Yeah.
I was really hoping they were going to come forth with that metadata results and
actual test result.
Yeah. But I mean, it might still happen, So
no, I think
I really was waiting on a big bombshell, like it was all blown up to be, but it really wasn't.
It wasn't a big bombshell. I didn't go crazy posting about it on Instagram like everyone else was, which I was like, am I doing something wrong? Should I post something?
No. Honestly, today, there's not a whole lot to talk about in UFOs right now. So
I still think it is important, and I think it's moving the narrative along, which is very good. But Race, thank you so much, brother, for joining us. And man, it's weird not being my producer, but thankfully I have Bill Skywalker, and I really appreciate all y'all at KGRA for keeping this family running.
Alan, it's good to have you back on the roster from Tuesday to Saturday, and you're one of our best. We love you, brother, and thank you for having me on your program.
All right, thanks. Stand by, everybody. We'll be right back with Lori Gum and Shane McEllen of the Q Files. Stand by.
Lost in a bad way, cost me my family. Chaos around me, can't hear my heart say, hey, that's the wrong way. Hey, that's the wrong way. Hey, that's the wrong way. That's the wrong way.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your most grateful host here on KGRA Radio, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, and throughout this cosmic universe. We can be found if you try hard enough. Coming up in just a little bit is Lori Gum and Shane McEllen of the Q Files. And I just want to thank Septembrio of septembrio.com for providing our bumper music every week. So if you heard that little Stranger Things theme at the beginning, they got the rights to use that as a part of one of their musical pieces, and that's why we're able to play that on the radio. But moving forward, maybe we'll get a little bit more time for them to play in case you're not familiar with Septembrio. But if you want to find out more about them, go to septembrio with a y.com. So I am going to now bring on my special guests for this hour, and that is Lori Gum and Shane McEllen, the Q Files. Welcome.
Hey.
Hello. How are you, Lori? So this is the first time, Lori, you and I have you've been on this end, but I've been on a call with you guys, which I really enjoyed. It was this panel of paranormal podcasters and researchers, and it was really fun. I came late, but I really enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah, that was all Lori's idea.
No, that was
it was just so great to, what we really wanted to do was connect to our listeners, and connect with them intimately and directly and hear what they wanted us to cover. And to hear their, responses to what we've done. So it was delightful. We love to have you join us at the end. But everyone on that Zoom meeting was just a delight. And we'd like to do it again on a sort of regular basis.
Yeah, I think it's actually a brilliant idea. Whether you're a researcher, podcaster, what have you, it's probably a good idea to bring brains together and brainstorm because often we're in our own thoughts, right? We're planning out our own shows, or someone is writing a book, and it's usually very singular. Maybe it's one or two people working together, and for the community to just think outside the box which is innately what we're doing anyway, but to be better at that is to have conversations with each other and really stoke the fires of invention.
Yeah.
So, Lori, how did you get involved with the paranormal in the first place?
Well, I've always been an observer of the unusual since I was a child. I've always been as we say, a queerdo since the very beginning. Interested in, UFOs since, 9 years old, and we had a ghost in the house. So I've always been really comfortable with what we consider the paranormal. And, I did this my whole life, but this all coalesced when I met Shane and we did, Queer Ghost Hunters, and really got a chance to be a true queerdo and bring people along with us. And then after that ended, it was a wonderful experience. But after that ended, Shane and I decided that, we really wanted to expand the notion of paranormal, because that had been our experience, from, weird ghost stories to just weirdness that the mainstream media, if you will, misses. So we really kind of became soulmates in bringing these stories and this knowledge forward. And it has been nothing but pure delight to work with Shane and, get to bring ideas. Like, I've been fascinated with stigmata my entire life. So, we got a chance to investigate stigmata and bring it to our listeners, and bringing those really weird things you've been interested in that, in the past, no one's really been interested in, to bring that and to see that our listeners really react to these stories has been an absolute joy,
Shane, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I know, kind of similar to Lori, I've always been interested in weird things and curious about the world around us. But it really all started when I was growing up. My parents' house is haunted. I guess still to this day, but kind of growing up and having those weird experiences and no one really believing you when they were happening, and kind of, continuing to have the experiences and trying to figure out what was going on or like why it was happening. And, it kind of just, it kept going, and then as I got older, if I was living in someplace new, maybe some weird things were happening. And then eventually, it was kind of more popular to be ghost hunting, and really got to explore that. And then I met Lori, and we had an opportunity to join a ghost hunting team, and she said yes, and then I was like, can I go? And that's really like kind of how I got involved doing it in like a structured way. I was going to say professional, but I don't know if any of us are really like professionals.
Well, Shane, you and I have talked about this before, but Lori, why investigating, LGBT cases, queer cases?
Well, I will tell you, primarily our, impetus for starting this series was to reclaim undiscovered queer history, to go back into when we talked about, our sort of tagline was, where do you find ghosts? Prisons, theater, and insane asylums. So why, this is where we were. We were in those places. And so it only made sense that there would be queer ghosts there. And why weren't people searching for them? So our we love the adventure of ghost hunting, but we thought that by putting this adventure online, and it was a marked decision to put it online to reach a younger audience, as opposed to initially we talked about a 2-hour-long feature-length documentary that would be shown on, in theaters or on television. But along with the director and the producer, we decided to do this on YouTube to actually specifically reach younger audiences, to talk about this unknown queer history, from men and young boys being into Mansfield Reformatory with the charge of sodomy, from lesbian nuns in a convent in Toledo, bringing that really unwritten history of queer people back into the history books. And as fun as the ghost hunting was, I think Shane will agree, our real reason for doing this series was to bring that unknown history to the forefront, especially for young people.
Well, there's something spiritual about the paranormal, I think. And, investigating the paranormal is sort of a spiritual exploration. It can challenge your beliefs. It causes you to reflect on, your state and existence in this universe. Is there a purpose? Is there an afterlife? I mean, all the big questions are wrapped up right into the study of the paranormal.
Yep.
Do you have an emotional experience when you're doing these investigations, or even when you're just sharing about them?
Yeah, very often we've had, either whether even it's just like a story of the history of a place where you find that is really kind of engaging in an emotional way, or even making contact with an entity and, getting to, I don't know, there's this like level of contact that you sometimes get, especially when we've done stuff focused around queer entities, where we've had these stories where this entity is coming out and, sharing with us information that probably was never shared, at least directly in their real life, or in their living life. But I don't know, it's really fascinating. Or even, taking the information that you can glean from an investigation and then adding more research to it. When we were at Mansfield, we were able to, between EVPs and the other tools that we were using, we pieced together, it was like 5 digits of a prisoner ID number. And we were able to take those 5 digits, and there's only one person in the entire history of the prison who had those numbers and their prison ID number. And we were able to figure out that like they were trying to tell us who they were, and we just weren't catching the name. And it was just a very powerful kind of like emotional thing. And on top of that, he wasn't in there for murder or something. He was in there for sodomy. So there, there was this level of maybe he was trying to connect with us because he was like, these people will understand more about, why I'm here, what was going on, than anyone else would have been.
Well, I think no matter what the case, if you can empathize with whatever spirit is there lingering, you're probably more likely to have a connection with them, and maybe they'll offer themselves to be revealed. Do you think that the reverse can be true? So let's say you're a gay couple and you move into a home, and that spirit that is lingering there was gay in a past life, right? But maybe they were oppressed, and then here is this couple that is different than all the other couples that have lived in this home for the past 60 years. Do they reach out? Do they knock on the door and say, "Oh my God, finally"?
I mean, I think that's possible. I don't know that we've had like that story or uncovered anything like that, but I do think that is kind of, there's this unique ability that our group has when we're doing it with the intent to find these entities, to be, creating this like safe space for the afterlife, and or kind of like whatever these entities are, like we're creating a situation where they can be more forthcoming with information that they're probably not sharing with other groups, and they probably weren't able to share in their living lives.
Right. So it's like therapy.
Yeah.
But if I could add something, we didn't have the situation where a gay couple moves into the house and then there's a gay ghost, queer ghost there that finds, respite. We had exactly the opposite happen in one residential investigation where we got called to a house with a gay couple because they were having great problems in their home. And we found out essentially that it was a homophobic ghost. So, this ghost was striking out at them. We have incredible EVPs from this session, and it was clear that that entity in that house was not comfortable with a lesbian couple living in that house. So that's kind of a whole other side of some of the things we encounter.
That's what I mean. You're sort of forced to explore the metaphysics of the universe, because you have to ask, well, if they're on the other side or in the liminal space, wherever they may be, do they not have access to more information that we do? Maybe they don't. You would think that you die, go to heaven, whatever, right? And you go, oh my God, I was such a terrible person. But this ghost clearly continues to, berate someone because of their sexuality.
Well, we say over and over again, an asshole in life usually means an asshole in the afterlife. So,
wait, so do they get to heaven?
God's a whole other subject that we could do a long podcast on. God and heaven, I think, are a whole other subject.
It is, but for me, those questions are always underneath. They're always present. Do your own spiritual beliefs? I don't know if you're atheist or whatever, but do they inform the work that you do?
I would say essentially I'm a deist, going back to the origins of our country. I think that there is something larger than we are, and I think it is the cosmos. And I think personally that the paranormal is nothing more than a crack or a gap in that cosmos that allows us to interact with other realities that very well may be trying to teach us something about our reality. And we need to keep that in mind when we're communicating with other entities or other realities. I think that gap is here to teach us and to be relevant to our everyday life. So I do believe in a much larger thing than myself. And I think the great challenge of being a human being is acknowledging that and being responsive to all of that cosmic energy and lessons that they, conspire to give us every single day.
Yeah. What about yourself, Shane?
Yeah. I was raised in a Christian household, and I think that kind of framework and ideology definitely has shaped my views now. But kind of as I continue to explore and grow within the kind of weird world. My understanding, I guess, is like significantly more complicated than like good versus evil. And, there's a heaven and a hell, and I don't know. I think there is the possibility for a plethora of options. And I think all of them are, connected in some way that we haven't quite figured out yet.
Mm-hmm. So in your investigations, have you had any moments that were supernatural occurring to you, or are you always just on the research end of things?
I mean, what do you mean?
Have you gone to research something, investigate something, and then something happened to you, for lack of a better word, an apparition or contact in some way?
Oh yeah, very, very much so. I'll let Lori tell it, but one of our first investigations at the Old Licking County Jail, kind of when we were just like little baby newbies, she got grabbed. I've seen things not on investigations, but on a specific one of the times that we were at the Mansfield Reformatory, we were in one of the shower rooms, and kind of we were getting a lot of information, and so we started using a spirit box, and it was getting really uncomfortable in the room is the best way to describe it. And so I ended up leaving the room just to see if we could get a reaction with only one person in there. And I had things, kind of like these little pebble things thrown at me from the cell block. So I went back to tell them, and he came out with me, and he had a sweatshirt with him, and he dropped it. And I turned around to be like, what happened? And there was a full-bodied apparition standing like right behind him. And it's only like the second time in my life when I've seen something and just been like, oh shit, that's a ghost. Like,
I mean, what other reaction would you have?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's unexpected. It's not, I mean, we went there looking for them, but it was still unexpected.
Well, because statistically the odds of having a ghost encounter are pretty low, even when you're, ghost and paranormal investigators.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. See, I'd much rather have an encounter with a ghost than, let's say, chupacabra, something of that like.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah.
So when you're in these spaces, do you think that prayers, burning sages to the four directions, all these rituals that people use are actually effective?
I think they are, not because they're rituals and not because they are, said potions or rituals or anything like that. It is because it is a focused mindset. And, Shane and I have definitely in the last 6 months really started to use mindfulness in our investigations where, we will focus and be mindful. And very often that's when we see something happen with the episode with the Lincoln Ghost Funeral Train. Very much so. So it's not the ritual itself. It's that when you focus intently on an object or a ritual or an action, you clear your mind like you do with, Buddhist mindfulness. You clear your mind because I don't believe that spirits can get to our minds if we have all this jumble in it. So those rituals very much, regardless of what the actual ritual is, those rituals clear our minds and allow the, bring down the barriers for spirits to communicate with us. And that's why they're effective. And I believe, and we have seen, I believe it's 100% effective.
Lori, earlier you said that you think that these paranormal openings are there to teach us. What are they supposed to teach us?
I think they're supposed to teach us how to be happy. Simply, that's it. How to be happy and to stop suffering. I think it is that simple. I think that the cosmos is, especially Shane and I have talked for many hours on my back porch about how this virus has, of course, we don't want anyone to die or get sick, but this virus has offered us a unique experience to go inwards and have solitude and start to reckon with these ideas of how to be happy beyond our jobs, how to be happy beyond our friends, how to be happy, beyond all of that sort of physical accumulation of relationships and things. And I think that's exactly what the cosmos is doing right now. And the importance of paying attention. It is difficult. Here's the thing. No one ever learns with success. We only become wise and learn with failures or difficulty. There is a strong connection between suffering and redemption. And I think that's part of the cosmic fabric, and I think that the cosmos's ultimate gift to us or what it's trying to give us is happiness and end our suffering. Suffering is the greatest of human ailments. Every religion in the world has recognized suffering as the greatest of human ailments. And I think the cosmos is trying to lead us out of that suffering into happiness right here on Earth.
It seems an odd way to do it, though, no? I mean, because sometimes, Shane's laughing, but it's kind of true, sometimes these are terrifying events.
But I think a terrifying event is something that can, provoke you and cause you to think about what was happening and why you were experiencing that. And, I do very much agree with Lori. I think we're either dealing with, the universe is trying to guide us into like this, figurative higher state, or there's actually just no point to it and we exist here and there's just weird stuff happening around us. There could be no point, or the point is to reach this other kind of like enlightened level. And I think if there is a point to trying to reach this other enlightened level, or if there is no point, seeing, it kind of shapes how you view these encounters. It doesn't matter if it's a ghost, Bigfoot, UFO. It could just be either the universe prodding you to explore and think, or it could just be, these other realms, these parallel universes, these things crossing through just momentarily. And, and it's unexpected, and that's why it's scary. It's unfamiliar. It's not understood. And that's why it's scary.
It forces you to think bigger than your everyday
Yeah.
activity.
Yeah.
So when people speculate that Bigfoot is sort of an interloper between another dimension and ours, right? Maybe that's the point. Maybe that would actually, if you overlay that on your theory, it fits quite well, because you have this thing that just appears in the woods, and then it disappears. It's gone. You can't find it. No trace. People have stones thrown at them, and no one's, to my knowledge, has been severely hurt by stone throwing. I think that makes sense. But even if that's true, shouldn't there be a next step? Let's just say, like for myself, right? I was like around 12 years old. I saw a UFO in the sky, and now I have a lifelong interest in it, that and the X-Files. But I want to know more, right? So then what does one do next? You've instigated the opening of my mind, right? I consider new ideas outside the paradigm that I was taught. And now what?
I mean, I think that comes down to, and Lori, feel free to jump in, whatever, but this idea of you have to pursue it in order to reach whatever the next level is. And we see that kind of throughout all of recorded history, whether it's religion or just the societal structure of whatever their, religious practices were, magic or just, worshiping the various gods or whatever. But there's always there's a point to it. And these experiences are explained within those points. And I think that's fine. But, there's always these steps you go through. There's this research you can do. And I think what we've done is kind of, write it off as all just hocus pocus, and none of it's real. And, we're a little bit jaded, but one of the things that Lori and I wanted to do with the Q Files was kind of just stoke the curiosity of the world and help folks find those little bits of magic that are still left.
Right. It's funny. We were talking about Twitter earlier with Race Hobbs, and as much as I have issues with Twitter, it is a good place to garner information. And I had discovered another podcast, which I unfollowed because of remarks that they made on their podcast that were clearly racist. And it was, I think, I'm not going to say, because if I get their name wrong, I'm going to call out the wrong person. But it was unfortunate because they were people who were writing blog posts and things that I was reading and following. And it really, cut me deep that they did that. And one wonders, we're in the world of the paranormal, right? You would think that it would just be 99.9% populated with people who are tolerant and curious about anything different. The other is not the other. It's just a different thing. It's a different place. It's a different way to think. Reality is not this, square cube, and everything that you decide you want to believe fits in there perfectly. It's just not. And it just shocks me that there's all these people that crop up in the paranormal that are not necessarily good people.
Well, that goes back to our interview with Chris Blake, one of our earlier podcasts on the Q Files, where Chris had written an article about how minorities are viewed when they see UFOs, and the whole discussion was, we're not believed, and his whole experience in seeing a UFO, and this is one of the things I think Shane and I do well, is that we connect these ideas of the paranormal or the unusual with relevant things that are happening today. And one of the things Chris Blake talked about was that Black people aren't believed in general. So of course they're not believed when they see a UFO. And it was really eye-opening to us that, why do we think, and I even said this to Chris during the interview, I was naive enough to think that, exactly what you just said, the paranormal is full of people that are accepting and tolerant and totally believe in the other. And it was exactly the opposite. The racism of our particular country in particular is absolutely a tint that lays over the paranormal community. And as a matter of fact, it might even be a little more virulent in the paranormal community, because we're talking about sort of extreme communities. And often those extreme communities can harbor extremely racist ideas. And Chris really broke this down and said, no, it's not, the paranormal community is not an exception to issues of racism. It is absolutely like the rest of the world.
I guess it's a shame.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess you can, it's like religion, right? You think that your religion calls you to love, calls you to have compassion and empathy, and yet you stand behind it like a shield for bigotry and hate and oppression. I mean, slavery was justified by the Bible, and I'm not trashing the Bible here. It's the people who look at the Bible and weaponize it for their own ends, and yeah, it really saddens me. So, but besides that negative aspect of the paranormal, what have been your most positive experiences in your investigations? Ones that have maybe even sort of just touched you?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I think one of the best things that we have is that there's kind of a community that gets built up, right? There's the overall paranormal weirdo community and all of the whether it's ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, magic, whatever it is. But what we were able to carve out is just this unique little area, like Lori said, these queerdos, and it's LGBTQ folks who are interested in all this stuff. And we were like kind of one of the first groups to do it in a very public way. And we had a lot of, folks kind of just come out and support us and encourage that because they hadn't seen it before. And what that ended up leading to was, us getting special, stories at locations about, whether it's gay graffiti at the Mansfield Reformatory, or it's, and I can't think of where it was, but it doesn't matter. It was a location, and the host, we were outside talking, just taking a break, and he starts, asking us questions about his son, who he thinks might be trans. And he just clearly didn't have anyone else to ask these questions to, and kind of like, well, these people might be able to help, and I don't have too many opportunities like this. So I don't know. It was just, we've been able to take a much larger community and break it down, and hopefully like kind of create a space that is safe and welcoming for a lot of folks. And I think that's kind of like the most heartwarming thing that I've got to experience. And I know that isn't paranormal, but
in a way it kind of is.
It is,
or at least it feels that way some days, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And one of the reasons that we started the Q Files is we wanted to expand the notion of queer. We sort of started expanding the notion queer to mean unusual too. So, we wanted to bring along this queer community that we had gathered for queer ghost hunters, but we didn't want to be limited to just queer stories. As far as LGBTQ was concerned, we wanted to bring in a very wide spectrum of queer, as in unusual stories, but yet at the same time create this safe space where people of color, queer people, everybody could join in on this podcast and be safe and be engaged and be, we're talking about, often our community, and just be safe to watch this and comment on this and know that you're not going to walk in and see a homophobic or, racist podcast. That we really did try to create a safe space for the viewers.
I was gonna ask a question that in jest, and I'm realizing how bad it sounds. But for those who actually might, you and I know that there are people like that are like, is it okay for me? Is it a podcast for me? If I'm not gay, and I know it sounds silly, but there are people that come from that place.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So I mean, it's one of those things where it's like it's a show for everyone. It's just we've made an effort to kind of raise the voices of folks who aren't always getting to speak and have their stories told. And as part of that, like kind of share stories that aren't normally told. So I think it's just one of those things where I don't know, like there was no way that Lori and I could do the show and not, talk about queer issues or racism in America, or I don't even know, like women's equality, just all of these different things. That's just kind of who we are. And I think it's just easier to put that out front and say, if you're going to have an issue with those issues being addressed, while we're telling you about this kind of weird piece of history or this paranormal thing, then it's not the show for you. But otherwise, there's definitely an opportunity for you to kind of learn and grow and enjoy a story with us. And
that's awesome. And I think it says more about you as people than anything else. So anyone who is listening, now is your chance to call in and ask Lori and Shane your questions. The KGRA Paranormal Radio app call line is 855-472-5483. That's 85 KGRA live. Bill, our producer, will pull you on and we'll give you your cue to ask your questions. And we have our first caller, and that is Ronald. And Ronald, you are on the air. Welcome. Or he was on the air. All right. Let's see if we can get that worked out. I don't think it's on my end. I'm going to leave that up to Bill. So I'm going to put Ron on hold, and we'll continue from there. So as far as your continued work, what do you guys plan to do in the future that is different that you haven't done yet?
Do you want to talk about that, Lori?
Sure. We've got a lot of things planned, but what we learned as we learned at the beginning of last season, all the stories that we had planned, not one of them did we actually cover. So we discover things as we go along. I think, this season we're going to be, really looking at nature and food and consumption. And I know that doesn't sound paranormal, but I guarantee you it will be. But looking at sort of the natural world and all the paranormal stories and folklore and history that exists with the natural world. So we kind of want to focus on that. For example, I'm going to throw this out there. It's kind of wacky. We would like to do a ghost hunt at a slaughterhouse. Has anyone tried to communicate with animal spirits? So that's kind of the direction we may possibly go in, but focusing a lot on that sort of supernatural, natural phenomena that we both are huge fans of. We both grew up in the woods and love nature, and looking at, sort of our food and consumption and all of those things that are very much the human condition at this time.
Are you familiar with William Stillman? He's author of The Language of Spirit.
No.
He might be someone you want to get in touch with. He is a medium, and he's very good. And he has been, as of late, tapping into the animal world.
Wow.
So he would be a great guest to have on the podcast, but also, I mean, maybe if you did, I think he's in Pennsylvania, so not so close.
That's close. We consider that close. Shannon and I are always on day trips. That's very close. Yeah. Arizona, not so close. Pennsylvania, we're up for it. Yeah.
I grew up in New Jersey, a state this big, so my idea of big and small is little distorted. So yeah, he would be great because he has a growing interest in communicating with animals, and we actually, in a not too distant away show, he was recording a video on investigation, and we were talking about that video and a dog of one of the other guests that were on the show. And then in the background of our recording of the show, you could hear something that sounded like the panting of a dog. It was really, really bizarre.
So like an EVP on the actual show.
Yeah. And
wow.
So I captured it. I tried my best to isolate it, and then shared it on a couple of episodes later. But yeah, it was really fascinating. So before we go any further, I'm going to bring on Ronald. Ronald, thank you so much for staying on hold. I think we have you on the air. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Ronald, how are you?
Guys, I was saying earlier, thank you for being on Saturday night. It's an interesting night to have you on. And I missed you the last few weeks when you were switching over, but I'm glad you're back and you're here and we get to hear you in this fine video format. And thank you to Amanda and Bill and putting everything together. Race Hobbs, of course, with this opportunity. Thank you very much for all this. Thank you for the phone call, too. And I had a question for Shane and Lori. You can each take either one or take them both if you want. What is your end goal when you do your ghost hunting? For instance, like the show Ghost Whisperers, if you remember that show, it was on a few years back. And she would actually go into the house and try to talk to the ghosts and lead them to the light and get them to go home wherever they had to go. What is your end goal to your ghost hunting, paranormal hunting? And then the second question, what is your most favorite tool to use?
So for me, the end goal isn't, to cross anyone over or to lead them to the light. It's just about, kind of getting to experience that moment in time with whatever is happening, to hopefully engage with them and get a story. And that's kind of where it ends. And I say that like that's kind of where it ends, at least for us, because I think once you start going and, you're focused on crossing someone over or taking them to the light, you start bringing a lot of religion into the experience. And I just don't feel comfortable kind of going into a location and acting like this is what you need to do. This is where you need to be. This is what I want you to do. And that's just kind of not what we're about. It seems almost aggressive to me, and that kind of is antithetical to anything that we do. As far as my favorite tool, probably just a recorder. Some of the most fascinating things I think that we've captured or heard or experienced have been kind of backed up with the recorder.
Yeah, and I would say I agree with Shane 100%. There's a hubris to thinking that you can even move someone to the other side. That sort of arrogance of believing that. I don't think I have the capabilities to help someone to the other side. What we do have the capability is to connect with them empathetically, create a safe space for them to tell their story. And that's what we can do. If that helps them to move on, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I don't think our job is to help someone. It is just to connect with them. And that's what we try to do. My favorite tool over the last 6 months is, and I know it's a combination tool, but is the Estes method, and using, the sort of spirit box with the headphones and questions. We've had some phenomenal, when we were at Brendu, we've had some phenomenal Estes method sessions, and pretty incredible. So I really look forward to us doing more investigations and using the Estes method to see what we come up with. It's pretty compelling.
Interesting. Thank you very much. And I was going to just ask real quickly. I have activity in my house. I've had doors slamming where there's no doors. I've had buzzers turn on when they shouldn't be turning on. Things like that. Lights going on when they shouldn't be going on, or going off when they shouldn't be going off. Doors opening and closing, like I said. Footsteps above me when there's nobody there. Things like that. What would you suggest I use to investigate that, or should I just start asking questions when I recognize these things?
I'm sorry, Shane. I would say just try to connect with them. Try to talk with them. Let them, know that you hear them. Number 2, you recognize them, and that you're there and you're empathetic and you understand, potentially why they're there. I would just try to, even without tools or anything like that, I would just try talking to them and letting them know that you hear them, you understand, and you're empathetic with them.
Good idea. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Alan. Great show. Great guests tonight. All your guests. Tonight. Thank you. Talk to you next time. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a good night, brother. All right, we have
thanks, Ronald.
We have one more call coming up. But before that, Rodrigo, I see your comments, and I'm going to pull up one of your questions here and now. And this question from Rodrigo is, Alan, how many people who are fascinated by the UFO topic are also sci-fi fans. Is this the case for your guests?
No, it's not. I think a lot of people.
Not me either.
Yeah.
I detest science fiction. Honestly, I really do.
So funny! Wow. Wait. So neither of you like science fiction in general?
No, and I'll completely confess, I've only seen the first Star Wars movie. Like that's the only one I've ever seen. Like I actually have a repulsion toward science fiction. I don't like it. It does not connect to me. I have no connection to sci-fi at all.
You do realize someone coming from the outside looking in thinks that's totally absurd.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I mean, I'm much more a sort of film noir, dark. I'm a big reader.
Okay.
I'm a big reader. I like dark stories, this and that. Matter of fact, my favorite book of all time is Moby Dick. I mean, I love these. But sci-fi I don't know, the future sort of sci-fi thing just leaves me cold. It really does. I know it's a weird thing to say.
Okay. All right. We're going to go to our next call because I don't think we have much more to say there. And we have Omara from New York City. Omara, welcome to Paranormal Now.
Good evening. Good to hear your voice. And hello, Shane and Lori.
Hi.
I wanted to say thank you so much for having your podcast. I think it's wonderful. I'm just really glad that you guys are out there. And I have a question, which is twofold. First, what does a ghost look like? And second, can the same ghost look or present differently to two different people? And I'll take my question off the air.
Go, Shane.
Yeah, so for me, I do think that entities can be viewed by different people in different ways. But for me, they typically appear kind of one of two ways. One is either this blacker than black, kind of like light is lost in it, shadow type thing, or they appear as electric blue. And I don't know what the difference is. I don't know, why that is or how that happens. But those are the only two ways I've ever encountered entities when I've seen an apparition or had a hint that there was kind of something somewhere around me. But I also know that there's this whole idea that an entity could try to appear to you in a way that is familiar or is comfortable for you, and that that goes into like a whole kind of like segue for that. But I do think that we're each capable of interpreting the same phenomena in different ways.
Lori, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And, I say this all the time. Shane sees all the apparitions. I don't. In all my ghost hunting, I've never really seen an apparition until we had a seance here for one of the episodes called The Seance. And as we were sitting hours later at the kitchen table, I saw a man peek around the kitchen cabinets. The first time I'd ever seen an apparition. Well, I thought he was a real person. We searched the house, to make sure there wasn't an intruder. So to me, he looked like flesh. I mean, this was I wouldn't have known the difference between that apparition and a person, a live person in the flesh. So that's really, Shane sees many more things than I do. And that's the first time I saw that. But that's, as a flesh and blood person, is how my apparition appeared to me.
As a flesh and blood. Okay. So,
I mean, just looked like a human, like there was no ghostliness to them. It just looked like any man had come off the street and peeked around the kitchen cabinets. There was no ghostliness to him at all. It was really just an ordinary looking human being. So
not a Force ghost like from Star Wars, which you wouldn't know about anyway.
Wouldn't know about it.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. So my favorite place to find the Q Files podcast is at the Q Files pod on Twitter. But where else can people go to listen?
Yeah, so you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, Stitcher, really wherever you want to listen to a podcast. And I saw some folks in the comments. We do have a YouTube channel, but there's only like 2 or 3 videos of the episodes up there. And we do that because it really doesn't benefit us to get listens on YouTube if we want to build a podcast. So we kind of do it sporadically. We'll probably have all of season 1 up there, after we roll out season 2. But right now, the best place is to just kind of find a podcast app that you enjoy and use that.
Yeah. This is a comment from Rodrigo. I admire Cheryl Costa. She has been doing an amazing work on the UFO field, namely something that not many people want to do, statistics. Very true. She also faces some prejudice, but handles it so well. I'm assuming you're both familiar with Cheryl Costa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you come across any discrimination?
So we get asked that question a lot, and I can't think of any particular instance where it has necessarily inhibited what we're doing. I'm sure there's, I don't know, conversations before or after we leave or something. I don't know. But no one has been directly discriminatory towards us. And in fact, we found, typically the opposite is true.
Yeah, true.
Is that we end up getting more information, or people are curiously helpful towards us.
I agree. It's been amazing that, when we started out with this, we really expected, especially going into more rural communities in Ohio, we really expected to, have more discriminatory experiences. And we did not at all. It was on the contrary. It really was. People, us making a snap judgment, thinking people who might have, discriminatory thoughts about us were, in actuality, the most helpful and the most engaged and the most interested in what we were doing, truthfully.
Life is so surprising, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It is. That's why we do this podcast. It's like, oh my God, what you discover about life is just so often extraordinary.
But that's what gives me hope. Especially during these crazy times. But you know what? 2 decades ago was a crazy time. A decade before that, and a decade before that. It's been crazy times as long as human beings have been walking on this planet.
That's true. That's right.
So I guess if I want to get enlightened, I just need to have more paranormal experiences, and then I can just transcend all this.
Correct. Yes.
Right.
That's what we're all shooting for. Yeah, that's it. That's it right there.
Tonight, Lori has offered us all the key to enlightenment. So this is your last chance to call in if you like. The KGRA Paranormal Radio app hotline is 855-472-5483. That's 85 KGRA Radio. We try to cover a lot on this show, and it's only once a week. So there are so many topics that I don't get to cover very much. And typically cryptids kind of take the back seat to other topics. Of the cryptids that you have explored, is there anyone in particular that you think might be a legitimate creature?
I think the Crosswick monster was probably.
I would agree.
Yeah, was definitely real. I don't know if it's a cryptid. I think
it's a big animal, probably.
Yeah, like it's either some kind of weird situation where there was some lizard in Southern Ohio, or kind of like a private zoo, or like a circus traveling through lost something. I mean, also even with like there's the Crosswick monster, there's the Loveland Frogman, and I think there's something else. But they all kind of relate back to each other, which makes me think that maybe there was just something down in Southern Ohio that was like actually real, because all of those stories kind of stop. You don't really hear about large reptiles anymore in Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Lori, do you think Bigfoot is real?
You know what? I do. I don't know that it is the entity of Bigfoot as we think of it, very, cursorily. But I think there is something. I think what you said earlier is there's a being that is in the gap between our reality and another reality that comes and goes. And I think that's exactly what Bigfoot and those other sort of cryptid creatures, or the Mothman for that matter, they're a sort of bridge between realities. And even if they're not real, the myth of them itself is a bridge between these realities to get us to question and to get us to look, as Shane and I always say, to the skies and go inward and look to the skies and think about this. And I think whether or not they're real or not, they have the same effect.
Right. Which again leads us back to that question of, is there an intent behind all of it? So if we take that assumption that we're here to learn something and that the paranormal experience can lead us that way, there are also, like Shane earlier, you described ghosts could have sort of like that kind of hazy, bluish kind of color, right?
Yeah.
But they're also a shadowiness. Someone like Heidi Hollis has covered the subject of shadow people,
right,
thoroughly, and she regards these things as evil as hell.
Yeah, so I was actually on that little, like, you had a few of us on, and she was there, and I didn't say anything because it's like, I'm not going to debate this with anyone. And I know she's like the expert. Cool. Well, no, it's like she's the expert, and I feel like we're probably just talking about two different things. And like, yeah, there's shadow people, and I've definitely seen shadow people, right? Mm-hmm. But there's this other kind of and I think it's a way of like my brain interpreting this like outside stimulus, right? And it's showing as just like blacker and black, because when I've seen shadow people, it's usually kind of like a darting or a peeking or a quicker movement, right? Whereas I can see an entity sometimes that is just, it's like the silhouette, but it's darker, and it's not really trying to get away from you or shock you. It's just like all of the energy it can produce or something.
Right. All right, Shane, Lori, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me. I really appreciate your input and the work that you have done.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thank you so much. And you're like the smartest, paranormal host we've talked to. Sorry to say that. You diss all of our other hosts, but you really are. It's a pleasure to talk to somebody smart. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And again, that's why I appreciate the work that you do. And it's different doing this live. I'm relying on you, right? The guests, but doing a podcast, you guys, you have to do the work. You have to package it. You have to figure out what story you are telling, and that takes work and effort. But I think that we can all agree that no matter what time we put into this, it's because we love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed, totally.
All right. Have a good night, Shane and Lori. Thank you so much.
You too. Thanks.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This is Alan B. Smith for KGRA Radio. You are listening to Paranormal Now on Saturday night, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard every week for the time being, because, I can't make promises, but I think we'll be around here for a while. So thanks to Race and Hobbs and Bill Skywatcher at KGR Radio for, just their constant support of Paranormal Now and this program. I thought I was really afraid for a while there when I had to, outside of my own control, cancel the Tuesday night show. I was afraid we just weren't going to find a slot, and we did. And I know they both and Bill worked really, really hard on making that happen. So thank you all at KGRA. I really appreciate you guys. All right, that's it. So tune in next week to Paranormal Now, same time, same place. And until next time, live in the mystery.